I know everybody, and we all have worked together in some form or fashion, in some other ways, but yeah, I can't say that I have much personal experience with alcohol and drink. I haven't had too much of a past other than social drinking, so I don't have a
Tequila.
yeah, there you go. But as far as throughout my whole career at the sheriff's office, 32 years, we've had occasion to come across underage drinking. It runs the gamut from when I was out on patrol 25 years ago. The county was a little more rural back then, and they would be what they'd call road parties, and you'd ride up on like a new subdivision that they're building, and you'd come up on them, and we'd have to approach it from two different directions, and when you drive up, it would look like fireworks going off because they were throwing their beer cans and their liquor bottles and everything all off out in the woods. And I hope that some of you here were not some of those back in those days, but but we used to. I've gotten many a confiscated cooler by doing those things, but you see, and that was out in the open, and you would come across it a lot back then, until because of the growth of the county, you don't have that type of activity now. Not to say that they don't get out in like vacant lots or vacant property, but it's become more undercover, and quite disturbingly, it has become more sanctioned by the parents, because back in those days, you would run up on a road party, and you would call parents, and they would truly be upset, and they would truly be mad at their kids for doing that. And you knew that once you called the parents, that something would be done. And we did make some underage cases and all, but a lot of the times it would just be you confiscate the alcohol and you call the parents, and you knew something was going to be done. But over the years, we started seeing more house parties, more parties at residences, and quite frankly, some of those parties sanctioned by parents. To where that the parents, that the old adage, well, I'd rather have them drinking here under my roof than going out on the street and getting hurt. Well, it's illegal for a 16-year-old to be drinking. It doesn't matter whether he's in your house or he's down the street over there in a vacant lot. And so you have to impress upon the parents, because we're at the time now that a lot of these parents were of the generation of some of those kids that we busted at those road parties. And so they didn't see anything wrong with it then, and so they don't see that much wrong with it now. At least now they're saying, okay, at least when I was doing it, we was out there on the street. Now I can keep my kids here at the house. So what we kind of need to do is kind of help emphasize, and I think the Be the Law campaign is a way to do it, but we need to emphasize and kind of shift the paradigm a little bit so that the parents can understand that this is not the way to be. In fact, the sheriff's office about a couple, 3 years ago, we busted a party out near Lake Hobosofsky, and it was some Stratford parents that had a big party, and then we got a call on a loud party, and man, we went out there, and Lord, they was all over the place. And we got vilified. We just got excoriated by parents at the school about, why did y'all do this? That's a good set of parents. Those are good kids. Those are great people. Why'd y'all go out there and bust them up? Why'd y'all lock them parents up? Do all this and that. But you never go wrong doing the right thing. And those deputies had to do the right thing. We had to, when you're given a choice of enforcing the law, you kind of got to enforce the law. And so that thing worked its way through the courts, and the parents got a fine and some probation and stuff like that. But we are not naive nor foolish enough to believe that stopped a single party. I can about guarantee you tomorrow night, this is spring break for the public schools. I'm not sure about the private school, but I do know that it's the public schools are spring breaking, and some of the other schools, that somewhere at somebody's house this weekend, they're gonna be a party with some teenagers, and they're gonna probably be drinking. And if we find out about it, we'll go and take action. Of course, they do it and kind of keep everything quiet. A lot of them call the neighbors and say, hey, we're gonna have a party over here, y'all, if y'all hear the noise, y'all come over here and join us or whatever. But that's one of the fundamental things I think that we need to do, is to educate the parents and to educate the kids. You know, we've done a lot of good work, you know, I don't know what you can attribute it to or whatever, but you see studies to where that you don't see as many teens now involved in sexual activity as you might have in the past. You know, certain age groups and certain teenagers are not as involved. They wait until later to get involved in it and stuff like that. So we need to look at what works with the alcohol, and it really goes back to the parents and in the schools and things like that, because the parents can give lip service to the fact that, you know, you shouldn't be drinking, you shouldn't be doing this and that, but until they really show it, you know, if the parents say you ain't supposed to be drinking this, but they got liquor stored over there like we got soft drinks, and they're taking a drink every night, the kids get sort of desensitized to it, so it's not as a dangerous thing. You know, in my generation, I'm 54, and so in my generation, you know, I had an alcoholic uncle, you know, drunk uncle comes over and causes trouble, and there was very little alcohol in the family. A lot of it had to do with religious, the Baptist folks don't drink, this and that, but, you know, a lot of it had to do with your religious upbringing that you didn't drink, or just the social mores of what you were going through at that time. Just people in the South just didn't do that much, so we didn't have that much exposure to it, neither my brother or myself. But as times change and the attitudes toward it change, then you started seeing the parents get more and more involved in it. So things like this, to be the wall, to get the parents to get engaged, and frankly the enforcement activities. You know, we get busted for doing our job, but that's part of what we have to do, and we will do it. We've written citations. We used to get them for. I don't know, do y'all ever remember, anybody here remember the old Last Friday concerts that used to be up at the Museum of Arts and Sciences?
Mm-hmm.
All right. You remember them, but you never went
I
there?
never went to one, but I remember, like, you know.
Well, those things, it's been about 20 years, so you're about almost too young to have been
No,
there.
I was 18.
Okay, but anyway, but I remember, they used to have, at Museum of Arts and
That's
Sciences.
right, it was like where the planetarium is.
Yes, where the
that's right.
planetarium, they used to have
Okay.
and I was a part promoter, but I did all the security for them, myself or another deputy. But it was at Museum of Arts and Sciences, and then toward the end, we did it down at the old.
They had like
I thought it was
punk rock,
fun.
punk
It
rock
was fun.
shows down there sometimes.
Yeah, well, you'd have some of everything. Some of the same groups that you hear playing at Bragg Jam got their start out there at Last Friday. But anyway, we had the beginnings of underage drinking then. You know, you have the kids, they were like from 14 up to 19 that were coming, 20. And we wrote several citations, and the citation that you write for that is like possession by consumption. They hadn't got the alcohol with them, but you can let them blow on the little portable intoxometer, a little alka sensor instrument, and if it registers anything, then that shows they've had alcohol. So we would write to charge possession by consumption of alcohol, and so you write them or either call their parents or something. So you could begin to see some changes, and you wouldn't get but just a few, you'd get just a handful, but then over time you get to see them more and more. And so you kind of see the trend change. And so that's one of the things that we just got to continue to do, the education piece, to keep the parents involved, do the enforcement piece from the law enforcement side, and do all we can on that. You know, all of us, and I know that Ronnie mentioned some of the bad aspects of it, where you run across people that have been drinking and they get involved in serious accidents. And I got some of my staff to look up some of the studies of things that happen. You know, people don't think about it, but there are other things that you get involved in, obviously, you know, wrecks and other drugs and sort of things like that. But Bibb County ranks pretty low as far as, and y'all probably know, I'm telling studies to people who do studies all the time, But, in things of, hospitalization due to self-inflicted injuries, in other words, people get to drinking and not like suicide, but just fall down and hurt
Yeah.
themselves, or fall down and break their leg, or bust their nose, or something like that, so, we're pretty, in Bibb County, we rank pretty high in that, I don't know why, I guess they can't drink and walk or something, but.
People
that's
that
just-
drink and fix the antenna on the roof and,
Yeah.
get up ladders and,
Exactly.
right, that's, those
Yeah.
kind of things people don't think about
Yeah.
sometimes, all those other kind of accidents. that
And
happen.
though, yeah, you don't think,
Yeah.
when you're drunk, it affects it's impaired behavior. So you're liable to fall down the steps, or you're liable to do something like that. Or you're liable to engage in other risky behaviors, sexual activity, things like that. So, all those types of things are going on, and maybe that's some of the things that we can kind of impress upon the parents, impress upon the kids, yeah, he's funny when Ed gets drunk, oh man, he's funny, he's a riot, he's the life of the party. But then he'd go down there and fall down and bust his head on the steps or something, So it's those kinds of things, you have to approach it from a different way, it's almost like a marketing thing, everybody knows that you ain't supposed to drink underage. But some of the other related things that can happen when you do, that are very unpleasant, that maybe we stress on some of those, and tell the parents about that. And then obviously, you get in there and other drugs, marijuana, the harder drugs, that sort of thing, that all kind of plays into it. That's some of the lesser known, everybody knows you ain't supposed to drink and drive, you ain't supposed to do that, so that's just part of what I think we need to do, or some of the things we should do. And the sheriff's office can certainly help out. I remember too, through the years, you approach it from every way. You get these calls about, that convenience store over yonder, they selling to the underage. And we've sat many a night, in fact, the old Spur station, up there around the corner, right up there. We have sat many a night over there in the old Masonic Lodge with binoculars, watching the clerk selling kids alcohol out of the Spur station. I don't know why the Spur station was such a hotbed of illegal alcohol activity, but it sure was. And we would bust them time and time again, and 6 months later they'd be back at it, and we'd be back in there writing them up again. And then every once in a while we hear of, this store, that store doing it. We send people in, or we'll watch them and bust them. So those are some other things. That might be something that you might can say. We've made these cases. If you're underage and you're fixing to go into a place to buy underage, somebody is watching you. Somebody may see you. Somebody is watching. You may wind up getting a citation. And then you also cite the person who sold it too. So there's all kind of different ways we can approach this. I just think that everything's on the table, and we all look at everything, and if anything that, the sheriff's office can do, we certainly gonna be there to help. And do
I have
what
a
we can.
question.
Yeah.
When you do bust a convenience store, is there, that's where when my baby's 25 now, but, they said they could always get it at convenience stores. If you do bust them, how soon can they start selling beer again?
Well,
I mean, is their license at risk?
it is to a point, but the way that works is it's sort of transactional. If the clerk, and it's the same way in bars, the Department of Revenue comes in, they'll do these little sting operations, and you go up to the bartender, and the bartender's the one that's gonna suffer the consequences. They're the one that's gonna have to pay the fine. They're the one that's for the Department of Revenue, I think it's like $1,000 fine for selling underage and not checking ID and all that kind of stuff. So like I say, when I say transactionally, it's only between the clerk
Not the owner.
or the thing, not the owner.
Yeah, they become the sacrificial lamb.
That's right.
Whoever's
Right.
selling it,
Precisely.
dealing it, they become the sacrificial
I
lamb to
mean, that's,
save.
Yeah.
that's just some guy,
Yeah.
making minimum wage, losing
Yeah.
their job, when
Mhm.
that's really,
Well, I know, but
Yeah.
but now if it does get pervasive and you see where they do it all the time, then there's some things that can be done with the license and all that. But like when you mentioned earlier, the tips program, and these license owners, I've had them call me. I mean, I do get a lot of it. Every time the Department of Revenue comes through, or even the sheriff's office comes through and does one of these things, I get called from some friends of mine that own bar. I got busted. That girl, she should have known not to sell that stuff. So I say, go on down yonder and throw yourself at the mercy of the Department of Revenue and bring your checkbook.
And you mentioned tips, Chief, our beautiful Amy Davidson over here is gonna be going out in the community, she's getting to be trained as a tips instructor.
Yeah.
So as a volunteer making person, that would be good for us to have somebody,
Oh, yeah.
cause that's an
That's right.
expensive cost, and we're gonna try to help offset that from the business owners.
Yeah, and you're exactly right, and that's a good thing. And there's a guy, and I know his name, but I can't call it right now, that works in the Department of Revenue, and he has, he is a zealot when it comes to these charges, cause he had a friend of his that, got killed in a car wreck after being, having been sold alcohol underage, all this kind of stuff. And so he has no mercy, which you shouldn't have any mercy, but they go in and typically the bar owners will go in and they'll say, we're going to do the tips program, we're going to teach our people how to do,
Right.
please have mercy on us, and they'll still charge them a fine, but it just,
Right.
if they don't do that and they get caught again, then they are at risk of losing their license because they've not taken any kind of remedial action to let that not happen again.
Right.
So that's kind of where that goes on that.
And my other question is it a state law or a local ordinance? What is it that these bars can let underage kids in and then say they just don't serve them? Such as Whiskey River and
Yeah,
that.
what's that, the old
the
18
18
and over
party
now.
to
Right.
21 to drink.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't see that quite as often now.
Mhm.
You used to see it in every commercial,
Mhm.
18 to party, 21 to drink.
Yeah.
They don't advertise, although they will kind of let them in, and they'll sort of look the other way, because they can still be held. Ever since this thing of civil liability, that if you get somebody to get drunk at your place and they go out and have a wreck or something,
Mhm.
these bars have kind of really, they can be held liable. You let an underage go in there and he gets drunk at your place and he goes out and gets in a wreck or something,
Mhm.
not only you got the person who he hit, you got the mom and daddy coming down on you and everybody else, and then the law enforcement and everybody jumps in. So you don't see as much of it. I know that they probably let them come in, but you don't see them advertising as much as what you used to.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I remember the old days, Whiskey River, what's the place over here, Flaming Sally's over there?
And
Lucy
what
Cooper.
about-
Yeah.
Lucy
Flaming
Cooper.
Sally's.
What out there by behind Jackson Jails?
You talking about Rockabilly?
Yeah, they always
Yeah.
getting fights
The
and
Rock,
stabbing.
the Rock.
The Rock.
Rockabilly.
The Rockabilly.
Yeah, I think that got bad after it was Rockabilly.
I
Yeah,
went to the
it was-
outside, but I didn't go inside.
Yeah, Rockabilly's is,
Yeah, can do all of
they have a team night out there, they used to,
I
they
think
go
that's so
back and
crazy.
forth, and,
Yeah, it just.
I don't know if they still do it or not, they don't open about 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And they have some of the issues, but they try to keep it, on team night. I'm not gonna be so naive to think there ain't something going on up there, but they do kinda keep a lid on it. We've not, fortunately, not had any wrecks come out of there or anything like that. Now, on the adult night, if they hadn't shot each other up in the parking lot, they may get out and drive drunk and stuff, but it's pretty, that place is kinda calmed down. They've got some good security
yeah.
up there.
Especially in the last 2 years.
They got some good security. Sometimes their security can do stuff to folks that police can't do, to kind of make them stay straight. But we haven't had as much issues up there, but it is a concern.
How many of the youth underage drinkers that you see, do you think are binge drinking as opposed to just having a few drinks at parties?
I think that it's probably more, and looking back, you know, a drunk is a drunk, you know, when they drunk, they drunk. You don't really think about how they got that way, but when you look at it and sort of dissect it, I think that's what you see more often than, especially with the kids, because they're not going, it's not like they come home and have a cocktail at night after get off work, you know, and have and they may see their parents do that, and their parents could probably do that for 30 years and never have a problem, you know, because they do it in moderation, all things in moderation. So they think that they can handle it, but the only time that these kids get to drink is when they're at a house party, or a road party, or out at a ball game, or when they're at a friend's house. So if you don't get to do it but once a week, or once a month, or once every 3 or 4 months, you're gonna get all you can get when you get it.
Especially when it's free.
Yeah, and I don't think, you know, when you think about binge drinking, you think of it in the sense of like a binge eater. They just gorge themselves. I don't think it's so much a compulsion to binge drink like that moreover than it is just a young person saying, I gotta get all I can get while I can get it, because I know I ain't gonna have another party like this for another 6 months or something, so I'm gonna drink it all. So in that respect, looking back, I think that is probably, if you wanna put a clear, a refined definition on it, I think you could call it binge drinking. And that is one of the things that, where I read an article or something that they were talking about lowering the drinking age to 18 simply because of the prevalence of the binge drinking, because if you let them drink at 18, maybe they'll do it more in moderation and get used to it and not just go out and just guzzle all they can drink when they can drink it. I don't.
Which is not true.
That's
But
right.
I'm gonna talk about that,
Yeah,
though. I'm
and
gonna tell you
Oh,
why.
okay, I'll let you cover, I was about to say something about
So
on
I
that
think,
too.
which
This-
is a
this
great
side.
segue into
Yeah.
Ronnie's
I just
point.
wanted to know from the judicial side,
now-
from the, yes, I mean,
Now, from the judicial side, when you, the law looks at it, if you're drunk, you're drunk.
Mhm.
You know, that's more the clinical side of it as to how they got that way.
but you're looking at underage drinkers, not necessarily whether they're drunk or not. So I was just curious as to how many that cycle through on the law enforcement side were actually binge or just underage drinking where they had a positive alka sensor
I see where you're going.
test.
We don't
Because I
really-
have the stats on the, the treatment side and,
Yeah, well, see, that would be something that you'd have on that side.
right,
The
right,
law enforcement side just looks at it, do
Are
you
you
have it in
drinking?
your system,
right.
or not?
So you don't really know,
We don't know, cause by the time we get there, they drunk.
mhm.
If they done guzzled 2 6-packs and a half quart or something, we don't know
That's-
how they got that way. We just
that's
know that
binge,
blood
yeah,
alcohol
definitely.
is pretty high.
Right,
So we just know they drunk. We just
Right.
know they have alcohol in their system.
right.
If we tracked them and saw them 2 or 3 times, if we saw them over and they were repeaters,
Mhm,
we might get a feel for, this guy, when he goes to party, man, he sucks it down.
mhm.
But we're like taking a snapshot at the time that we see
Sure.
them. So they drunk or they ain't. They're drunk or they're not, or they have alcohol in the system or they don't.
Mhm.
So we don't go out that farther in to see.
Mhm.
I see what you're saying, and that's a great idea to look, but I think more on the clinical side of like when you see them in the hospital or when you see them come in
Mhm.
from a wreck, or you treat them in an over and over fashion, then you can probably tell if they're binge drinkers rather than, just to get drunk, one time.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Chief.